The wreck sits in complete darkness, 3,000 meters beneath the surface of the North Atlantic, and it has been there long enough that the ship no longer looks like a ship. What was once a hull has softened into a low ridge of iron oxide and sediment, its lines blurred by more than a century of slow chemistry. Somewhere inside that ridge, according to the manifest recovered from an insurance archive, are crates that once held coin and bullion. The water above it is nearly 400 atmospheres of pressure, cold enough to hold it just above freezing and utterly without light. No diver will ever stand on this deck. The only witnesses are machines, and the story of how those machines came to exist is, in many ways, more remarkable than the cargo they were built to reach. We tend to imagine deep-sea recovery as an act of finding. The popular version of the story ends at discovery, as though locating a wreck were the difficult part and lifting its contents merely a matter of reaching down. The reality is almost the reverse. Finding a wreck is a problem of search and patience. Recovering anything from it, especially at the depths where the most valuable losses tend to lie, is a problem of physics that took the better part of a century to solve, and that even now can only be solved at enormous cost, with margins so thin that most attempts never repay their investors. The engineering that makes this possible is not a single invention. It is a stacked set of compromises, each one wrestling with a different consequence of the environment. And understanding those compromises is the only honest way to understand why so few of these operations ever succeed. Begin with the pressure, because everything else follows from it. At 3,000 meters, the weight of the water column presses on every surface with a force of roughly 30 megapascals, which is to say about 4,400 pounds on every square inch. This is not a hazard in the ordinary sense. It is a constant, indifferent condition that shapes every design decision. A sealed, air-filled container of any size will be crushed unless its walls are thick enough to resist that load. And thick walls mean weight. And weight is the enemy of anything you hope to lower and raise through kilometers of water. The engineers who first confronted this problem in a serious way were not treasure hunters at all. They were oceanographers and naval researchers in the middle of the 20th, and the vehicle that broke the conceptual barrier was the bathyscaphe, a design that solved the pressure problem not by resisting it everywhere, but by concentrating human survival into a single small sphere. The logic of the sphere is worth pausing on, because it explains the shape of nearly everything that operates in the deep. A sphere distributes external pressure evenly across its surface, converting what would be a bending load on a flat wall into pure compression through the material. And steel and titanium are extraordinarily strong in compression. This is why the crew compartments of deep submersibles are round, why the pressure housings that protect cameras and electronics on modern robots are cylinders with hemispherical end caps, and why the failures that do occur are so catastrophic. When a pressure housing implodes, it does so in milliseconds, and the energy released is enough to destroy anything nearby. Every component that must stay dry and full of air at depth carries this quiet threat, and the discipline of designing for it is unforgiving. A flaw in a weld, a scratch in a viewport, a fitting torque diffraction too loose, and the ocean finds the weakness with mechanical certainty. But the great shift in deep recovery came from abandoning the assumption that humans needed to be down there at all. The manned submersible was a triumph, yet it was also a liability, because keeping a person alive at the bottom of the sea is the single most expensive constraint in the entire enterprise. Every kilogram of life support, every redundant system, every hour of decompression, every limit on how long a crew could remain focused in a cramped, freezing capsule. All of it added cost and risk. The solution was to separate the human intelligence from the human body, and this is the essence of the remotely operated vehicle. The workhorse that made modern deep recovery a commercial possibility rather than a research spectacle. The operator sits in a warm, dry control room on a ship at the surface, watching through the vehicle's cameras, and the machine below does the work of hands that no longer need to breathe. That separation, however, introduces its own governing problem, and it is the tether. The remotely operated vehicle is connected to its mothership by a cable that carries power down and data up, and that cable is both the vehicle's lifeline and its greatest complication. A 3,000-meter tether is heavy, it drags in the current, and it transmits every motion of the ship on the surface down into the working depths. When a swell lifts the vessel 5 meters, that motion travels down the cable and threatens to jerk the vehicle off its target. The engineering answer to this is a device that most people never think about, but that quietly determines whether any of this works at all, a system called active heave compensation. It uses sensors to measure the ship's vertical motion in real time and drives a winch or a hydraulic ram to pay out and haul in cable at exactly the rate that cancels the heave, so that the vehicle at the bottom hangs in relative stillness while the ship pitches above it. Without this decoupling, precise work on a fragile wreck would be impossible, because the operator would be trying to perform delicate manipulation while the entire platform lurched with the sea. Consider what that delicate manipulation actually involves, because this is where the romance of treasure gives way to the reality of the task. The objects being recovered are often coins, and coins do not sit in neat stacks after a century underwater. They fuse. Silver and iron and copper react with seawater and with each other, and over decades they cement into concreted masses bound together with corrosion products and marine sediment. What the manifest describes as bullion may present to the vehicle's cameras as an unremarkable lump indistinguishable from rock. The manipulator arms, with their hydraulic joints and interchangeable tools, must work with a strange combination of strength and restraint, strong enough to break apart concretion and lift heavy debris, gentle enough not to crush what has genuine numismatic or historical value. Some operations use suction systems that lift lighter material into recovery baskets, like an enormous, careful vacuum, sorting the seabed grain by grain. All of it happens under lights that reach only a few meters into water that swallows illumination almost instantly, guided by an operator interpreting a flat video image of a three-dimensional world, judging distance and force through the mediation of machinery. The navigation problem deserves its own attention, because at these depths the familiar tools of position are simply absent. Satellite signals do not penetrate water, so the global positioning that guides a car cannot guide a vehicle on the seabed. Instead, recovery operations build their own local coordinate systems using sound. Transponders are placed on the seabed around the worksite, and the vehicle and the ship measure the time it takes for acoustic pulses to travel between them, calculating position from the speed of sound through water. This is called acoustic positioning, and it is precise, but it is also a reminder of how thoroughly the deep ocean strips away the instruments we take for granted. The speed of sound itself varies with temperature, salinity, and pressure, so the system must account for the shifting properties of the water column to place the vehicle accurately. Every certainty of the surface world must be rebuilt from first principles below. Now, the difficulties compound, because the treasure most worth recovering tends to lie inside the wreck rather than scattered around it, and entering a collapsed, century-old structure with a robot is a problem of a different order. The hull may be unstable, its remaining structure held in a fragile balance that a nudge could bring down onto the vehicle. Silt, disturbed by the machine's thrusters, clouds the water instantly and can reduce visibility to nothing for long minutes, forcing the operator to wait, motionless, for the particles to settle. And the wreck is not an empty container. It is, in many legal and ethical senses, still a ship, and often still a grave, and the engineering cannot be separated from the questions that surround it. Recovery firms operate under maritime salvage law and in many cases under agreements with the governments that hold sovereign claims to the vessels or their cargo. And the machines are frequently required to document everything they touch, to photograph and map the site before disturbing it, because the loss of context turns history into mere metal. This is the point at which the economics assert themselves, and they are sobering. A deep recovery operation requires a specialized vessel, and such vessels cost tens of thousands of dollars a day to charter and crew. The remotely operated vehicles are worth millions and demand teams of technicians to maintain, because saltwater and pressure are relentless in finding the failures in any system left running long enough. Weather can halt operations for days, and the working season in many parts of the ocean is short. Against these certain and mounting costs stands a deeply uncertain reward, because manifests are sometimes wrong. Cargo may have been salvaged or moved before the ship sank, and the objects recovered may prove less valuable than the promoters hoped. The history of commercial deep recovery is littered with ventures that located their wrecks, deployed their technology flawlessly, and still ended in bankruptcy because finding and reaching the treasure turned out to cost more than the treasure was worth. The engineering can succeed completely while the enterprise fails entirely.